Today we're talking about my real thoughts on the Fuji X100VI, as I've owned it for over a year now. Throughout this video we are going to talk about why I bought this camera in the first place, the photo and photo quality, video and video quality, the durability of this camera, how good actually is the built-in flash, my thoughts of the recipe system that Fuji uses and what recipes I use, file size, the internal ND, the autofocus, how I personally like to shoot on this camera, and finally, if I would buy it again. First thing we're going to talk about, why I bought this camera and the ecosystem that I came from. I am a Canon shooter. I have had the R5. I'm currently shooting on the C80, but I've been intrigued by these pocket-sized cameras without shooting film. Film is expensive. It's a lot to do, and I don't know, I just really don't enjoy it all that much for everything. So I was shooting on the Ricoh GR2, but clearly this camera is broken. The whole front element broke off. I was hard on this camera. So I was upgrading to the Fuji X100VI in hopes that the durability would be better. Now, when I bought this camera, I was intrigued about the recipes. I was intrigued about the fact that it shot 6K video. And I was also hoping that I'll get a camera that could be a hybrid that could actually handle a professional job. We'll get into those throughout this video, but the first thing I want to talk about is the photos and photo quality. This camera has a 40.2 megapixel sensor. I personally like to shoot in both RAW and JPEGs, so whenever I have an SD in the camera, it's loading a RAW and a JPEG photo. The JPEG has the recipe built in, whichever one I choose, and the RAW has no grain, no edits, nothing on it, because I sometimes like to think, and I don't think I've done it yet, but I like to think that if I take a photo that I really love and I want to blow it up really big, I don't want to be locked into the fact that, oh my goodness, I only have a JPEG that is already edited. I personally like having the flexibility of having the raw photo, so that is why I do that, even though a lot of the times they just sit on a hard drive and I don't do a whole lot with them. But overall, the photos are absolutely incredible. Whenever you pair the 40 megapixel sensor with the fact that you can do a digital zoom, even though this is a fixed 23mm lens on this camera, you can still turn the dial on the lens to change the focal length, but all it's doing is cropping in. Whenever you import that raw photo into Lightroom or whatever you edit on, that is going to have the full frame photo, but the JPEG will have it cropped in by 1 times or 2 times, whatever you select. So there is a large, which is a full sensor, medium, and a small. The small definitely breaks down a little bit in the JPEGs if you're using the strong grain setting, but I still think that it is cool to have multiple different focal lengths on this fixed lens camera. Now, to dive into the video a little bit, something I was really excited about with this camera is the video capabilities. This camera shoots 6K 24 frames per second, which is really cool. It also has an internal ND that we'll talk about a little bit later, and I was excited about the fact that this could be a video camera that I could shoot my postcards on. I, like so many creatives, enjoy shooting postcards whenever I'm traveling, whenever I'm on a hike here in Colorado. But the video in this camera, I'm not gonna lie, it's a little bit of a letdown. Is it good quality? Yes, it is. Is it great quality? Yes, you could actually make an argument that it is great quality. One of the problems that I had with a camera like the Ricoh GR2 was that the video wasn't good enough to be good and not bad enough to be bad. So that was annoying, but the Fuji I can still shoot video on. It shoots an f-log2, which I've learned to color pretty well. It is a simple normal log that you can color in a great way, but the video just doesn't do it for me. I don't love the fact that the autofocus kind of stinks whenever you're in video. Shooting video on a camera that has a fixed lens just feels very crippling. I like to have my 28mm on my R5, and I do think that at the end of the day, I don't love the video on this camera because it is not a full frame camera. There's not as much depth, there's not as much to the image in my opinion. So if you're trying to find a camera that is a hybrid photo and video camera for you to use on the road, I don't really think that this is that. The video is great quality. I've used it as a B cam. I have used it in the past, and it is high enough quality that I will post it, but it just lacks a lot. because this camera is clearly designed to shoot photo. Next thing we'll talk about is the build quality. This camera is very robust. It is very metal. It is a big hunk of metal. It's pretty heavy, to be honest. And I thought this thing will stand the test of time. I didn't think I would have to worry about it because I am personally pretty hard on my gear. I broke the Ricoh GR2 because I was putting it in my pocket and maybe throwing it around a little bit hard, throwing it in my bag. I like a camera that can keep up with me, especially whenever it's for the day-to-day moments. I'm not going to be babying it. The size of it is a little bit bigger than I would have liked. I can't really fit this in my pocket. If I really want to force it, I probably can, but it's not comfortable. It's not comfortable where you can throw this camera in your pocket and then pull it out to take the photo you want. If you put it in your pocket, it's going to take a few seconds to get out. So for me, I'm not a huge fan of that. I always have to have my Herschel sling bag whenever I bring it somewhere, or I guess you can get a camera strap. When I'm carrying a camera anywhere with me, I don't really like having a camera strap around my neck. Then you just look like a tourist, and I don't know. I'm just not a fan of having the camera out all the time. So I bring my sling bag anytime I bring this camera. One of the biggest complaints that I have about the build quality of this camera is the shutter button. Now, for a while, you can buy a little thread on Etsy for way too much money where it's a little bead that goes on top of the shutter, so it makes the shutter bigger. But it's not the complaint about that. It's the fact that after having this camera for a year and using it, of course, but not doing anything wrong, the half press shutter is broken. I thought that maybe this was just me. I thought maybe I did something wrong. Maybe there was a setting wrong, because you could still feel it and sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. But I went on Reddit and it seems like this is a very common problem with these Fujifilm cameras. That is not okay, because that's how you get your autofocus. You half press for the single shot and then you take the photo. If you can't do that, you got to mess around with some settings, and I found a workaround with this like pre-focus setting and having it on single shot, and it works fine now. But it's very annoying that this $2,000 camera is having a broken half press shutter. It just feels like poor build quality being masked with a big hunk of metal camera. But I think that's the only complaint that I have about the build quality of the camera. Next up, let's talk about the built-in flash on this camera. I use this for my day-to-day photos a lot, because once the sun goes down, or as the sun is going down, the camera breaks down a little bit. A lot of times I'm shooting portraits on this camera, just of my family, friends, whatever it may be, and the flash is really nice for that, especially whenever it is dark. This flash is not the strongest flash in the world. To be honest, I'm not sure the exact specs of the flash, and I don't want to look it up because I don't know a whole lot about flash photography. But what I do know is that I shoot on TTL mode, which, if you don't know, is essentially auto for the flash. It sees your settings that you're using, and it compensates that with whatever the flash will be that makes sense. And whenever you'll shoot portraits at sunset, or you just want to take a photo of your friends at night, the flash is plenty strong and much better than having a clunky external flash on the top of the camera. Next up, let's talk about what I think of the recipe system on this Fuji X100VI. This is the first Fujifilm camera that I have ever owned, so I am still kind of new to the recipe system, but I think that it is very cool. As a professional photographer myself, I like to use this for my day-to-day photography, and having a camera that I don't have to worry about editing the photos whenever I get home is really, really nice. A lot of my friends that have it feel the exact same way. So the recipe system is really cool. I think that it's something that I am surprised that other camera manufacturers have not stolen. I guess they all have their little things where you can change your contrast, saturation a little bit, but it's not the same. This can give you a true stylistic look. In my case, I like the recipe called Bright Kodak. I made an entire video about this recipe that I will link down below. You can go steal it, see different example photos, but it is so nice that you can have the photos come out of your camera fully edited. But if you don't want them all to be edited, you still have the option of shooting that JPEG and RAW. Like I mentioned, the RAW will be a RAW file, there will not be any coloring on it, nothing. The JPEG will have the recipe baked into it already. It's a really fun thing that brought my passion for street photography back. And I think that is the case for a lot of people, and it's my favorite thing about this camera. And actually there's something about it that drives me crazy that I can't replicate it on my R5. I'll edit it in Lightroom, I'll spend all this time doing it on this better camera, but I swear I'm a good photo editor. I can't get the same look. So it's a real testament of how good these recipes really can be. Next up, let's talk about file size. Now I'm going to dive into file size for photo because I don't think that the video file size is really relevant for this camera. If you're interested in video file size, comment down below. I can put something in here, but I think the photo specs are really much more important for a camera like this. A RAW photo for a 40 megapixel photo, I don't think people are going to like this. I'm looking at it right now, 87.2 megabytes. That is huge. Something that I think a camera like a Canon camera has done is it's like 1-to-1 of megabytes to megapixels for the file size. So for example, the Canon R5 will have a 45 megabyte file for a 45 megapixel sensor, which I think is understandable, but 87.2 megabytes for a photo is absolutely insane. And all that photo is a picture of my wife on a hiking trail. That's a lot of data, especially if you don't want to buy unlimited hard drives. But on a positive note, if you shoot in JPEGs with the recipe already built in, which a lot of people I know don't care about the raw files, they just want the JPEG that already has the edit, is a total of 23.9 megabytes. So that is a lot more tolerable. And then if you do want to go into Lightroom and compress that, you can compress it down to like 2 or 3 megabytes if you really want to. But yeah, the file sizes are pretty large, but if you only care about the JPEGs that are going to come out already edited, you're looking at about 22 megabytes per file. Next up, let's talk about the internal ND in this camera. This camera has a built-in, which is crazy if you look at the size of this, built-in 4-stop ND filter. Is that enough for you to shoot video in 24 frames per second at f2? Not really. Is it enough to compensate it a little bit to where you can shoot it like f5.6, maybe 7.1? Absolutely. So it is fun to have, and I was told that even though this isn't the strongest ND in the world for video, it actually is because a lot of people think that the bokeh ends up looking weird whenever you shoot at a high shutter speed. So some people like to use the internal ND for photo mode and not have their shutter get above like 1/1000th of a second. Personally, I have not really seen any difference, so I do not use that. But the internal ND is there, but not as strong as an ND that you would really want to be. Like on my C80, I have 10 stops of ND, so I never really have to worry about direct sunlight with it. But it's cool that this little camera has it, so I'm not going to talk too much crap on it. And then the last thing we'll talk about with this camera before I get to if I would buy it again is just how I shoot on it overall. I shoot on this camera almost on full auto, which might come to a big surprise to a lot of you, but the full auto is really good on this camera. I essentially shoot on aperture priority. So I have my ISO to auto, I have my shutter speed to auto. Sometimes there are cases where if I'm shooting something that is happening fast, you can just mess with this dial right on top and you can adjust your shutter speed very quickly without necessarily changing into a different camera setting. I always have my lens on whatever aperture I want to shoot on. So I will typically float around f4. There are cases where I'll go higher, cases where I will go lower. It does go all the way down to f2, but whenever I'm shooting on this camera, I like to have as little friction as I possibly can. One of the points of friction is that the autofocus is not that good, especially since the half press shutter has broken on this camera. It is definitely something that I have to play with a little bit more than I would like, and the autofocus could be much better. For a camera that came out in 2024, I will say the autofocus is quite disappointing. And then the last thing that I'm doing whenever I'm shooting is I am messing with the exposure compensation. So typically sitting about 1 stop over 0. That just gives me those bit brighter highlights that I like, the brighter, colorful look whenever I'm taking photos on this camera. Now to summarize it all and give you an answer of if I would buy it again. This camera is really good, but it definitely is a trendy camera. My friend just bought a Fuji, I think it's the X-T4, that does have an interchangeable lens system. A camera like that will get you just as good of an image as this, and you won't necessarily have to pay the X100 tax for it. I paid $2,000 for this, which is about $400 over retail, which I will not be afraid to admit is a bit excessive. And the crazy thing is that this camera is still hard to get your hands on. All of the Fuji X100s are hard to get your hands on, but I do think that it is a really cool camera. If you're looking for a day-to-day camera and you are a professional or you know something about photography, I think that this camera is a great option. If you aren't really into photography and you're just looking for a day-to-day camera, I think that there are much better options for you. You can get the Canon G7X, which I know is also hard to get your hands on. The Ricoh GR2 or the GR3 are also great options. You can also, if you just want like the vintage look, you can get something like the Canon PowerShot. I made a whole video about that. This old camera that's like 15 years old at this point. It gives you a cool look. I don't think that this camera is good enough for you to waste your time buying if you're not really into photography. It's kind of like this weird superficial thing that photographers pride themselves off of having a Fuji X100. I personally would buy this camera again. There are obviously things that I don't love about it, but that will probably come with every single camera I will ever use or buy for the rest of my life. And I think that this camera is great for some people. If I didn't answer any questions that you may have about this camera, please comment down below. I will be happy to reply to your comments and let you know anything else, because at this point I do know this camera pretty much in and out. If you're interested in buying it, I doubt you can find it for retail, but maybe check Facebook Marketplace or eBay. Be careful though. Thank you for watching this deep gear dive. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I hope you learned something as well. If you decide to buy it after this video, let me know in the comments. Subscribe if you are not already, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace. Looks pretty sick.